All right, great. We are live on Facebook. Good evening, everybody. Happy Friday, TGIF. For those of you in California, you can do it just a couple more hours before dinner time. We are excited to have a coffee tonight with Doc Boissiere of Tallahassee, and I'm going to turn it over to the doc, so just sit back. We've been giggling for a few minutes now, so join us in all the laughs here. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the comments on Facebook, and we'll be sure to ask them later on.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's going to probably get a little bit confusing here because we're both have the nickname of Doc, but I'm pleased to have with us Robert Boissiere from Tallahassee. He came highly recommended by my old friend, Mac Kemp. And we're just going to share some tales, I guess, of A, how did he get into the business, and B, what's it been like to live the dream. So Doc, yes. Over to you. How did you first get enticed into getting involved in EMS?
After I got out of the service, I wanted to see firsthand how field medicine worked. I took an 80-hour DOT EMT course in the summer of 1972, was led by a fellow named Gary Brees, who was a fire chief from Virginia, who went on to become president of the International Fire Chiefs Association, an RN at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital named Bill Fight, and a teacher at the community college named Sandra C., who was a ringer for Share. Well, after taking the course, getting registered, we started. I took the first call that the ambulance service ever had in Tallahassee. A little minor traffic accident right down the street from Tallahassee Community College at Appleyard in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. It was a whole different ball game. Everything that I learned from day one, I learned by the seat of my pants. And the first time I would encounter something, it scared the bejeebus out of me. But after it came around on the guitar again, I said, oh, I know what that is. I've seen that before. Yep. So it wasn't so bad, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Every day was different. It was a privilege to be in the presence of people that were in physical, emotional, or mental anguish, and treat them with respect and dignity, regardless of their station in life, their education, any other qualifier you could put on them. Because the job really was about the patient. It wasn't about us, it was about the patient. Yep. And I'm just glad that I was able to participate.
It's interesting. Those of us like yourself and me who got into this kind of early, there was a lot of OJT.
Yes.
Sort of like, okay, what do we do now? Okay, I think I can figure this out. But it's something else that I think that you bring out very, very strongly is it was about the patient.
Yes.
Compassion for the patient, probably having the worst day of their lives, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And you're there to try and help them through it or help them out in the event that they don't survive. So you started at was it, you were at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital then?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, sir.
And how long did you stay in EMT, and when did you move over to the paramedic program?
Oh gosh. I honestly do not remember what the year was, but my group took the first paramedic exam that was held in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
And because I was at the front end of the alphabet, my paramedic number was 281. And now I believe they're in 7 or 8 digits. So I get a kick out of the youngsters and say, tell me what your paramedic number is. They don't know. They certainly don't have it memorized.
Yeah.
But a lot of change. When we started, if you say thumper to kids now, they think it's a cartoon character from Walt Disney, but it was an implement to do CPR mechanically.
Yeah.
And things have come a long way since then. It was basically advanced first aid.
Sure.
A lot of times you did CPR for 20 miles or so to get to the hospital. And I guess we know at this point that the people that stand the best chance of non-deficit survival are those that somebody jumps on their chest as soon as they hit the floor, and EMS is there within 5 minutes, 8 minutes. So it's different.
Yeah. What you're talking about is interesting because I worked for early in this in the 70s, and we were a long way from the hospital most of the time.
Yes.
Yes. How about the kids that you have mentored over the years? What do you think you bring to the table for the youngsters?
Well, it's certainly different than anything else that you'll encounter. You're going to be put in life and death situations. Luckily, you will have somebody there mentoring you, and they won't let you get in trouble. But at the same time, they want you to have a front row seat to see if this is something you want to choose as a career, because it's not textbook medicine, it's field medicine. There's a world of difference. So, you know, there is a psychological component to this. I've seen more than one person come in after a bad call, put their radio and their keys down and leave, and that was it for them. They were done. Yeah, I myself never followed any of my patients beyond the ER because I didn't want to keep score. That was for my mental health. In order to keep doing it, I had to stay in the milieu where I did the best I could while they were with me, and then I let go.
Yeah.
So
maybe healthy.
So yes.
You may have been the healthiest approach.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So who are the guys that you worked with that sort of help you make your bones?
Well, there were two Black gentlemen in the early days. A fellow named Waldron, who was big as a fullback, an NFL fullback, had been to Vietnam, was cool as a cucumber, and he took a not so streetwise young white boy and helped calm him down in the heat of the battle. And then there was another Black fellow, John Reddick, who was a lay preacher and skinny as a piece of spaghetti, who taught me that chicken and rice or gumbo is a perfectly legitimate breakfast food.
Cool.
But they were good fellas. Gosh, there's been so many people shuffle through during my tenure. A lot of them went on to become MDs, attorneys, PAs, other things. But they got, I think that their time in the field was a good thing to prepare them for what they ended up doing.
Yeah.
So,
what are some of the lessons you learned from those folks early on?
Well, all you can do is the best that you can do.
Yeah.
Some people are going to die in spite of the best of your efforts. Some people are going to survive in spite of your worst efforts. But you try to do your best. And the whole time I was there, I realized there was more to learn than I could ever learn in one lifetime. So I pursued it. When the internet came along, I did things like listen to UCLA breath sounds, reading books, just being immersed in it. Our training was upgraded in hospital the whole time that I was there. There were great nurses that helped with that.
Let me ask you about the nurses. One of the things that I've seen diminish over the years is the ability of getting paramedics in training into the hospital setting to be guided by the nurses, particularly the ER nurses. Those are the ones that probably taught me more tricks of the trade than any other group of people. Do you find that true?
Well, things weren't as busy then. They're they're wham bam slam now pretty much most of the time, just by virtue of population growth.
Yeah.
And they're the lulls when you could talk over a patient's care in the days before HIPAA. HIPAA is I would like to shoot the HIPAA fairy. Don't quote me. If you went on a call and you saw something or learned something that was a once in a career event, you weren't supposed to share that information with anyone.
Yeah.
What I would like to see evolve is that as long as you redacted your report, so there were no identifiers that could possibly identify a particular person as the patient,
yeah,
that information could be shared with your peers, because everyone isn't going to encounter the same calls. And if they can profit by what someone else saw on one of their calls, then it helps them out. It gives them a leg up should they ever happen upon that. There was one call I remember in particular. We went to a young gentleman who had an altercation with his girlfriend, and she stuck a fillet knife into his chest. She started up around his collarbone. It was only a half-inch laceration. I thought, well, this can't be much. But a fillet knife is a long knife, a long skinny knife. So get him into the ambulance and start doing a secondary survey, and the lung sounds weren't the same from one side to the other. So, okay, well, let's go ahead and put a 14 gauge needle into his chest and see if we can relieve that an equal amount. I was chicken at the time to go the clavicle route. I went in from the side,
sure,
at between the fourth and fifth rib. Yeah. And I expected, once we were in, to hear a big hiss of air. Not this time. There was instead a free-flowing flow of red Kool-Aid coming out of his chest.
Yep.
So luckily, one of my peers happened on the scene and suggested that we take a liter bag, empty half the fluid out, connect up the tubing, and connect the tubing to the business end or the receiving end of the needle in the chest, put the bag on the floor, and we had a field chest tube.
Chest drain, yep.
Yes, and the doctor, one of the cardiac doctors says, you probably saved this man's life. And he was not exactly spastic with praise. So that was a high kudo.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Any other stories like that you want to share?
Well, a lot of things that are not for the tender-hearted.
Yeah.
GSW to a high school girl that not good stuff, and then a college post-grad student that committed suicide with cyanide. And I have always wondered why people are in a hurry to leave this world. As bad as things are, there's always a tomorrow. And another thing I guess that I learned was if you find a weapon in a house and you empty the cartridges out of that weapon and puff up your chest and think you've done the job, wait till law enforcement gets there and pulls another weapon from one side of the mattress, a third one from the other side of the mattress, and you have egg on your face.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I did that one night, talked a suicide guy down,
Mm-hmm.
and my buddy who was the sheriff came in. He's poking around and said, "Did you happen to know this was here?" And he pulled out a handgun from under the cushion on the couch, and I said, "Hell no."
Yeah. Yes. Well, and you learn. You learn.
Yeah.
And if you survive, you learn.
Yeah.
One of the things that I passed on to other students and peers and firefighters and anybody that comes onto a suicide scene, do not ever let them out of your sight. Do not let them go in the bathroom. Do not let them go put a different pair of shoes on, nothing, because the end result of that folly can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
To you and your partner or the patient, whatever. So pass on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you and I have learned just by virtue of a lot of experience on the street is what's called situational awareness.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Always got your radar up.
Well, it's a survival thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Really is.
Yeah.
Really is. So you spent, I would say, okay, so you got your EMT somewhere around 72. You probably got your paramedic somewhere around 78, 79, I would presume, which is
Yeah.
about when most of us jumped into the pond for the paramedic.
Yes.
What was your perception of how your scope of practice changed once you became a paramedic?
I guess administration would call it, they increased our productivity. They gave us more responsibility, but they didn't give us any more money. Well, it's the difference between, oh gosh. Well, you as an EMT, you couldn't do anything invasive. You couldn't start IVs, you couldn't push medicines, you couldn't intubate. And as a paramedic, you were responsible for that. One of the last things I did was I took a 3-inch thick binder of protocols that were page after page after page, single-spaced prose, and turned each of those protocols into a single algorithm, color-coded, green, anybody can do this part, yellow, only the paramedic can do this, red, paramedic better call the doctor before he does this. Brilliant. And it's just something that in the field, if you lose your place, you look at that and you're right back on track.
Did Leon County adopt that approach?
Well, I lost track of what went on after I left. Nowadays, they have the laptop computers, the tough books that are, I guess, mil-spec field laptops. Very easy to put that in. Yep. So the laptop as a quick reference. You don't even have to break stride. So
yeah, that's a brilliant approach to doing protocols, because what you were describing initially, that's what I call shelfware.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you know, not very useful in the heat of the moment.
Very helpful on the scene.
Yeah, golly.
I've got it in a spiral book that I can flip up to the page if I've had a slight brain aneurysm problem.
Oh yes, oh yes.
I can still look at that flow chart and figure out what to do with the algorithm.
Sure.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. Really brilliant. Yeah. Good stuff.
Well, and the other thing that I would say is prepare ahead. Prepare ahead. If you know there's a chance you're gonna start an IV, what I did back in the day, I took a towel and I laid out the angiocas, which were the needles that would go into the arm or wherever.
Yep.
And I laid out my test tubes for the blood I would draw and my syringe, and I laid everything out in a sequence. And I did that every time I got in the truck. And then I rolled that towel up and tied it off with a tourniquet. So everything I needed was in one hand. Yep. So I could start my IVs. And with an EMT partner, I would get in and I would set up and start my IV while he was hooking up the 12 lead, hooking up the pulse ox, putting oxygen on. So we were both working in tandem to
Yep.
shorten the time on scene.
Brilliant.
So you work out a rhythm, and that's something else. If you work with the same partner over a long period of time, you develop a rhythm.
Yeah.
There's hardly any verbalization that goes on. You reach out your hand and they put in it exactly what you need at that moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great.
I like that idea of sequentially rolling up in a towel what you need to get that line going. That's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah.
I used to do what I call my mental Rolodex when I'd be responding to a call. If it was reported to be this,
Mhm.
I would say, okay, what do I need to be doing when I get there? You know, what was step 1, step 2, step 3.
Sure.
So I tried to get my head lined up to deal with what I was going to have to deal with.
Yes.
You mentioned that earlier that you sort of, when you got them to the hospital door and they were turned over to the emergency department, that was it. You were done with it.
Yes. Yes.
And that was for your own personal protection, I think.
Yes, that was for my own mental health. I didn't want to keep score to see what the final outcome was. I just wanted to do the best I could while they were with me. And I'm not on the list for sainthood. If there was a mistake in the field that anybody could make, I made it. But good Lord willing, I learned from the mistake and didn't repeat it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I put, I went to Washington for a pediatric course.
Yep.
We intubated ferrets, among other things.
Yep.
And that was an interesting experience.
And it paid off, I'll bet.
Oh yes. You know, along the road, my father and my wife's father, both deceased. I put them in the rubber bag to go to the morgue. I brought one of my peers in from a helicopter crash into the morgue. There are scars along the way. There are that. Nobody gets out with a whole skin. And there's a slideshow back in your lizard brain that you're not consciously aware of it. But if you do something for 35 years, there's not a public road, office building, apartment complex, that there's not a slide in that slideshow. So
yep.
And it's not something terrible that, oh my gosh, you poor thing. You don't even think about it until you drive an hour out of town and all of a sudden it's, somebody took the bag with all the bricks off.
Yeah. Good observation. And it's interesting when I'm doing critical incident stress management with some folks, I'll tell them, look, I put my pants on the same way you guys do. And I said, I've got a lot of ugly home movies in my head.
Yes.
Have just stacked up over the years. So don't be afraid to open up, because that's what I'm here for.
That's a very valuable service for field people. It really is.
It's interesting.
Oh yeah. But if you're on scene at something that later evolves into a CISD event, we had one call where going to be politically incorrect, or a drunk crossed the median and ran into a station wagon full of kids coming back from the beach. Some were killed outright. The one that my partner and I cared for, by the time the helicopter got there, the whole floor of the ambulance was awash in blood.
Yeah.
And there was a younger person that showed up at that scene, and I thought, you're young, you need to see what it's all about. You can take this kid in the back seat here. And then at CISD, everybody goes around and you share your view of the elephant, and everybody gets to benefit from what other people saw and felt at that scene, with the understanding that it doesn't leave the room. So that nobody's going to take that out and make gossip out of it.
No notes, no names,
Right.
just
Right.
get it out.
Yeah. But that was a valuable lesson for me, because I got to learn that in the week prior to that call, he'd had several bad calls that I was not aware of. So I got spanked.
Yeah, I was privileged to be deeply involved in the defusing after the NAS Pensacola shooting on December 6th in 2019.
Oh, wow.
So I know what you're talking about. And it's no names, no notes. Let it all hang out, and I'm leaving. So it's cool.
Wow. Yes, and
useful.
go ahead.
We didn't until Jeff Mitchell came along in the early 80s. Nobody really paid any attention to the garbage that we were all walking around with.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
good thing. So we have about 5 minutes left. What would you like to share? What are some of the tidbits that you'd like to leave behind for people to tuck away for future reference, to make them better at what we do? Maybe let them continue their career longer than they otherwise do.
Martial arts for self-defense. Some people are on drugs that have no feeling of pain, and they're out of control.
PCP, for example.
Yes. Yes. And I had one fellow buck naked come down the driveway towards us carrying a machete.
Yep.
At which point we gently brought him to ground, which is a euphemism, like the police like to say, I tapped him lightly with my baton. But in general, I would tell people, I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm not going to let you hurt me either.
Yeah.
So then, sobering thought.
Something you shared earlier, which I think was extremely valuable, is that you were on a constant process of learning during your career.
Absolutely.
I think that's a very big takeaway from my standpoint.
Yes, sir.
I'm kind of a nerd, so I understand that.
Yes, sir.
If kids can do a better job understanding physiology, understanding patient assessment, understanding anatomy, they can be a whole lot more effective on the street.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you know from a lifetime, the first Nancy Caroline book is a whole lot different than the Nancy Caroline shelf full of books now. Yeah. And a lot of the things that we learned by the seat of our pants are as margin notes in the Caroline books now. And I think to some extent, kids don't value your experience because, oh, well, I knew that was right in the margin of the textbook.
Yeah.
So if they stay with it long enough, they'll learn. Yeah.
Yeah, we've come a long way since the AAOS Orange book, haven't we?
Yeah. Yes, we have. Oh, golly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's been a fun ride.
Yes. And I was very fortunate to work with some very good people. I think it was a privilege to serve people that were in their extreme situations. I'm very happy that I have been able to do that.
Yeah. That's kind of an honor and a privilege in my book.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm going to let my fearless leader pop back in here. There she is.
Hey.
And Izzy has joined the party.
She was going to. As soon as she heard the conversation, she was here. Yes, our fearless office assistant who sleeps on the job is falling asleep on my lap. Thank you both. This was wonderful to hear from you and hear about the very early days. So always love having a good Friday coffee conversation to kick off a great weekend. Those of you watching, I will stall for 30 seconds. So throw your questions up if you have them. We are getting the dog out of the way. Very excited to be working on our digital research center build. So you can visit emsmuseum.org/archives, I believe, and start peeking in. We are scanning all of our collections, and we have some generous donations coming in, and we are going to continue to scan as much as we can and as quickly as we can, get them turned around and back up online so that you can research them, search through them, and use them as you see fit. If you're writing papers, doing conference presentations, whatnot, please start using the Digital Research Center here at the National EMS Museum. If you're not a member, please consider joining. It's our 15th anniversary, so now's the best time to celebrate. But visit emsmuseum.org a lot because lots of cool things are happening. So that's all I've got for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another Coffee with Doc, another couple of great people lined up in April. If you can believe it's April already. Have a wonderful weekend. And thank you both, Doc and Doc. That wasn't too confusing today. Thank goodness. We'll catch you all very, very soon. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Doc, thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Yes, sir.